Have you ever wondered how the world's best copywriters come up with a way to tell compelling, fascinating stories that generate an avalanche of sales for almost any product or service? That's the main theme of this episode. And of course, we will also be covering lots more tips and strategies to help you monetize your business. I'm Caleb O Dowd, and this is the show that brings you profit-producing ideas from the greatest marketers in the world. My guest today is John Carlton, one of the greatest and most respected copywriters in the business, who is also affectionately known as the most ripped off writer on the web. He's also known as the copywriting teacher behind master marketers such as Rich Schefren, Eben Pagan, Frank Kern, and many others, including myself. John, welcome to the show.
Yeah, always happy to talk with you, Caleb.
I have learned, so much from you over the years, studying your ads, reading your books, reading your newsletters, ripping you off. I think that there are very few people that are as easy and as enjoyable to learn from as you. I have spoken about this many times, that there is work that you can look at from many advertisers, and it's not so evident what is actually going on and what's being done there. I always love reading your ads because it's just loaded with so many things to take away that are just easy to learn, fast to learn. I have said it before, I'll say it again, I'll keep saying it forever. I have spent years reverse engineering your ads, and this has been a long time coming for me. I have always enjoyed talking with you and learning from you. I've mentioned on many occasions that you gave me the gift of your swipe file, I think about 20 years ago. I spent 12 years living in a new country every year, and I carried your swipe files around with me. There's so many things that I would love to talk with you about. And of all of the copywriters out there, you just seem to me, from studying your stuff, to have such a powerful investigative reporter style strategy for researching. How do you go about that? How do you tackle finding a really great hook, a really great story on a product or a guru?
Okay, first of all, I'm trying to get Gary Halbert in over my right shoulder up here. Let's say that's a photo from Gary Benzavinga's event. Were you there in New York?
I was not there, but I was living with Gary at the time, and
God! So he wouldn't let you out of the condo, right?
he wouldn't let me out of the dungeon to go there. I was locked up and not allowed out.
The reason I enjoy talking to you so much, it's funny. I was asked by a major guy. I won't name him because he's I don't know if the book's going to come out or not. But he wants me to do a chapter in a book about how to help writers who are already at a really good level, how to get better. So almost like talking to the A-listers about well, what are you missing in your life, and I never think about the same stuff that other people think about. And I think that's, and I'm waiting to see if he's going to approve what I came out with, because my thing was basically, lead a more exciting life. It's hard to have stories to tell. It's hard to connect with the great unwashed heathens out there if you haven't sampled their life, if you haven't hung out in bowling alleys and, and talk to people who don't share your bullshit American views on politics and stuff. It's impossible in a lot of ways. And one of the worst things is when you become a successful writer, suddenly you're isolated from people. It's like you don't hang out with the people you used to hang out with anymore. That's the number one problem that people in business, when they come to me, hey, my business was doing really great. It was doing gangbusters. And then, we've kind of lost, started to lose to the competition. Competition is eating our lunch and they're doing stuff. And I all I got to do is pull up their website against the competition's website. And the competition is all getting into the psychology of the customer. And the guy I'm talking to has just lost touch with his audience. He's no longer semi broke or desperate or really excited about the stuff. He's kind of bored with it. And when you lose touch with the people you're going after, you're dead in the water. The competition are like piranha. They're just gonna they're just gonna feed
Yeah.
on you until you're nothing but a skeleton. And it's a lot of business owners don't want to hear that shit. But when I was as far as gathering background information, when I was a kind of a cub, I guess, to myself, I'd never met another copywriter before, or excuse me, another freelance copywriter before. When I started being a freelancer, I had to make up the job on my own. I'm living in my little hovel at the beach in Los Angeles, and I hadn't met anybody, and I was getting my ads from the LA Times want ads, or not my ads, my job prospects. People would say writer wanted, and I'd go, and eventually I found the Writers Guild, and I started getting hooked up, and I got some jobs, and because I was willing to work all night and do a job and turn it in the next day, when they were thinking they'd give me 2 or 3 weeks to get the job done, and suddenly they're like, oh yeah, so they bring me back in, and then they talk to me, hey, I found this writer, I'll work all night and get it to you tomorrow morning, and got my reputation going. But what I learned to do is um, never get my information about a client that I had from the client. He would say, yeah, my business does this, my customer base is, they're all like this, and blah blah blah, and they talk, and I go, okay, and I'd make my notes, and then I'd go and I'd talk to the people who would talk about him behind his back, like if he had salesmen in the street or on the phones, I talked to them. I talked to customer service. I talked to the receptionist. The receptionist was a great font of information that the client often never knew about. So the owner of the business was often so out of touch with what was going on. It would sometimes be hilarious, and it's like they wouldn't tell him. The salesman didn't tell him he was wrong when he said, I got a great idea for a headline or a new product or something, and it's it'd be crazy, and they might stand up to him, they might not. When I first got involved with Gary Halbert, and that's the term to use, is involved. You don't just casually brush up against Gary Halbert if you're going to work with him. You have to get immersed in this whole world. It just envelopes you and sucks the life force from you for years at a time. But when I was talking about him, he was much the same way, and that was one of the things that we had in common, was a distrust of the people we were working with. It's like, yeah, they're rich and they're doing this stuff, but they don't know what they're doing. And the proof of that, the pudding, was a lot of the clients that he had, and we were laughing about this. They would get millions and millions a month from what Gary had been doing with them for ads. And they started to believe that it was them. It was their brilliance that was doing this. And so they go and get out of that market and do something else in an entirely different market, thinking that they got the golden touch, and they're going to, all they got to do is come up with a product, and they'll, people will love it, and of course they know what people want. And oh yeah, we'll probably get Gary to write an ad or something for them. And one guy went from, it was that first diet thing that Gary was doing. The berry trim, I think it was. I think it was berry trim.
Oh, that was big.
The guy behind that, his next project was like making dolls for adults, and not the kind of dolls you're thinking of, Caleb, but they just like dolls, like you play with and stuff. It was the most idiotic thing I'd ever thought about, and I think it was because his girlfriend was I don't know, was crazy or something, and of course it failed. No amount of good marketing could help, because there's no list of people who are sitting around pining for childhood dolls, new ones. So anyway, it was crazy. So anyway, so if we were going to deal with a client like that, you get the behind the scenes info if you can. And that's, I took journalism for a while. I was on the school paper in both my high school and my college. And I wanted to write, I wanted to do stuff for it, but they found out I could draw cartoons. So I became the staff cartoonist for both my high school paper and my college paper, which meant I didn't get to do a lot of journalism. But I learned enough that I dragged along the five W's and why, who, what, when, where, why, and how. And it's just if journalists and modern journalists can go back and study this, and media would be a lot better if people really paid attention to this stuff. Who's involved, what happened, when did it happen, why did it happen, how did things progress, what went on. If you just get into this stuff, you just start digging and making sure you have those answers first, so that you can test yourself. I haven't got the full story because I don't know why people were involved in this. I don't know how this product is made. I don't know who is involved in this. And then you start coming up with, say in the supplement world, it's like chemists are involved with this, and the client will just say, yeah, well, we got some chemists to do it. So I don't let that go. It's like, chemists, what chemists? Who are they? Where are they? Oh, it's a special lab in Northern California that's the only one of its kind in the world. With it's got PhDs who spent all their time in Bulgaria. There was literally one product in one of the one ingredient in one of the early supplement products I did for the bodybuilding industry, and they found this plant that only grows on the north side of a Bulgarian hill for 10 days each year. And apparently that was serious. I looked into this. It was like, that's the rarest kind of ingredient you can have. I don't know I don't remember what it did, but I found out, what it did and why the chemists needed that and why something else wouldn't work. And that becomes the basis of the story, that, something that they were just poo-pooing. That's how that was the one-legged golfer thing too. It was like, the guy, it was golf training videos. And you have to excuse me a little bit. We are very smoky around here because there's forest fires nearby in California, so the air quality is very bad. My sinuses are screaming in agony. Anyway, I hope I don't have to blow my nose. Okay, so the one-legged golfer ad, my clients had a product they were doing, which was a series of videos instructing people how to be better golfers. And to do these videos, they would go out and find these experts who were off the beaten track. They weren't famous, but they were really good at what they did. A lot of these guys were hidden and involved in what was an underground golf community. That was fascinating to me. That was another story. But this first guy had this, what he called the triple coil swing. And he was all hot about teaching people the triple coil swing. And the video that they did with him was all about the triple coil swing, which was not just, I don't know, I don't even remember how it worked. But I finally got around when I met him, and asking him, what was it where did the epiphany for this triple coil swing come from? He said, oh, no, nobody wants to hear that story. It's boring stuff. Just tell me. He says, okay, I was golfing once, and I'm behind this foursome where there's this one-legged guy who hops up to the tee box, leans down, puts his golf ball in on the tee, leans back, and with one leg makes a gorgeous swing and hits the ball farther than everybody else on his foursome. And, of course, I thought, okay, one-legged golfer, good God, But what that one-legged golfer was doing was a balance thing that this teacher figured out, hey, a two-legged person can use that same theory around it. It's all in the hips and all. And he went off and even, then this triple coil swing. But how he got around to it was the story, and that became the headline. I forget the exact wording, but how a one-legged golfer discovered the secret of hitting balls further and straighter than you ever had before, something like that. So,
yeah, that ad like transformed the golf advertising world.
Yeah, what was funny was they
bad.
Yeah, they were advertising the big golf magazines. I think it's actually Golf and Golf World or something like that. Anyway, there were a couple of big magazines. $100,000 to run a single page ad, I think, and we were doing full page ads, but my ads were 3 solid pages. So you're going through the magazine, you're looking at, there's a lot of pictures and stuff. And you come upon our ad, there's no picture, it's just a headline, solid blocks of copy, turn the page, more solid blocks of copy, and more. So it was a facing page and what they call a double spread, I think. And so it was a lot of money that they had to spend. When the people at the golf magazine saw the ad they were going to run, they tried to talk my client out of running it. I mean, they were adamant. We don't want to take your money. This, they thought it would dirty up their magazine because they wanted clean lines and everything. And this thing just looked like an ad we'd slapped together for, the Key West Chronicle, whatever that paper was. They just kind of throw, type would be sideways sometimes. And we used all the classic elements of direct response. And by the 4th time they were putting that ad in the magazine, the guys were incredulous. They said, "Why are you doing this? And we feel bad taking your money." And my clients were going to tell them they're making big bucks off of this thing. We hit a vein. And so they put the ad way in the back of the magazine. They tried to hide it. They did everything they could because they were embarrassed by it. We added a few photos here and there just to make it look more like an article. But what hit was the headline and the fact that we weren't talking down to golfers. The golf this is a good example of what I was talking about. The golf magazines think an article or an ad with Tiger Woods in it. Tiger Woods said, "Use this golf ball and it'll improve your game." Nobody who reads those magazines thinks they're ever going to be in Tiger Woods, be equals to Tiger Woods. They're duffers. They can't break 100 to save their lives. They're horrible. They're hooking and slicing. They're doing all this stuff, but they love the game. And that's who I hooked up with because I actually played golf at that time. And that's the way I played. I was a duffer. I completely understood that. So I wrote not to the guy who already has almost a scratch handicap, which means he's almost at a professional level or semi-pro, which is what golf magazines want to believe their audience is full of. And it's not. It's full of guys who just love the game and they're there and they fantasize about being really good. But these articles by these guys, they get articles by guys who have been in the PGA for, most of their lives and have won major championships. And it's like, what does he have to tell the average golfer? We got something to tell the average golfer, because, it's like, and I just, I used to, in the direct mail we did, I used to address the recipient as "Dear fellow golf nut," which is something the golf magazines hated. It's like, golf nut's like a slur to them. It's not among regular golfers. It's like, yeah, I'm a golf nut and I suck on the course, but I love this game. I'd love to get a little bit better. If you can give me a couple of extra strokes off of my game, I'll be really happy. And they started, flooding into us because we understood the audience.
And I think it's such there's so much there. There's so I think so many advertisers get that wrong. Like they think they need really high powered kind of credibility and star power, but there's really 2 ways to go. What comes to mind is not just your ads, but Gary's desperate housewife loses. I don't remember the headline, loses 57 pounds to get even with cheating husband or something.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't.
There were several of those. Yeah.
You can go down the road of big star power credibility, but you can also just go down the road of just talking to the average person and having a story that is just so relevant to the average Joe or Jane in the niche. If you're enjoying the show, just a quick reminder to press the like button, subscribe to this channel for more useful monetization tips, and turn on notifications so you don't miss all of the great tips coming up in future episodes. And thank you for sharing this episode with your friends and colleagues. I really appreciate it. So many advertisers, so many business owners, so many creators of products and services just really don't understand the power of story. They're in competitive niches where, their competitors are eating their lunch and they're going out the door with just kind of straight benefit copy. And it's very hard to compete in highly aggressive niches with just benefit-based copy. And yes, you can have a really good mechanism and a unique mechanism, and you really need that. But a story is what can very powerfully differentiate you from the competition. And so many people, I think, copywriters, business owners, product creators, just don't go to the lengths that you would go to get that story. They just get a product and they just think about it and they sit down and they try and create advertising for it, not understanding that every product has a story, every service has a story, and there's so many people and so many elements that had to come together in order for that product to be created, and there is a story there somehow, some way.
Yeah, the storytelling is our brains as humans are hardwired to understand and crave stories because that was the primary way of exchanging information, keeping history alive. Because there wasn't writing until the early cuneiform tablets, the soft clay tablets in Sumeria that they would use a stick and poke out stuff. They started with regular stuff, but our ancestors, the writers back then, the people who learned how to write, to learn how to essentially translate the stories that were spoken, were the first writers, and they weren't freelancers. They often had to have a sponsor. That was It was the case for writers to be either slaves or employees, or they're totally dependent on whoever had the money because it was very expensive and there wasn't any printing. And then eventually the printing press came along, and then the people started writing on their own in France. Victor Hugo, whoever wrote the Three Musketeers, of magazines came out. These guys started writing and they became freelancers. They weren't beholden to sponsors. They actually started making enough money that they became independent. I mean, we owe it to our distant ancestors to make as much money and live the best life we can, because they often were, they had no freedom. They weren't able to write what they wanted. We can write anything we want. We can be obscene. We can write fantasy. We can write and do things, and we're responsible for the bottom line. That is a luxury that our ancestors couldn't even dream about. They were just grunts in the grinding aristocracy that ruled, the authoritarians that ruled most of the world, throughout history. So it's a heavy responsibility, and I take it seriously, frankly, being a writer. And one of the reasons I became, a guru was because when I started out, I was desperate. I'm living in my little hovel. I've got enough money for the next month's rent and maybe another tank of gas. And I'm doing this, and I got my first check for $2,000, which was going to cover everything for the next month. And then one day, very soon, like within a couple of months, I had 6 months covered, and I was like, "Holy shit! This, I have discovered a way, to make more money than I ever dreamed possible, but also to be free of bosses." And then I told my first client to go suck it. And that was freedom too. It was like, you don't own me. I'm just not going to cash your check, lose my number. Don't ever call me again. That was so freeing. It was awesome. And the benefits just kept multiplying, and it's like, then I realized businesses don't run without the writers. They can have, the guys who are firing their writing staffs, and bringing on AI, they're going to have a rude awakening over the next year and onward if they keep doing that, because AI is very limited as far as original thinking. In fact, it doesn't do any original thinking.
Yeah.
So it's going to be funny to see this play out, but a lot of the rookie writers, the younger writers, they're going to get hurt during this process. So you got to scramble. But we've always scrambled early in our careers. So if you really believe that you're meant to be a writer and this is what you want to do, then you got to work a little harder. I work really hard. I mean, I said goodbye to my girlfriend at the time because I just thought, I'm going to be married to this job for a little bit. This is before I met Halbert, by the way, who just hated it that I was out there having sex and fun. But the girlfriend I had when I first started, I was in my little hovel at the beach, and I just told her, I said, I got a job. I can't spend the night with you. I have to go back and I'm going to write all night. And she just could not understand that. And as I left, I was opening the door. I was just kind of shrugging. Something whizzed by hit my ear and shattered against the door jamb. And I thought, oh, I opened the door and closed it. It's the last time I ever saw her. Because there are lessons in all this in stories, and I use that story to tell other people. It's like, if you're going to be a writer for a while, you got to be married to it. You got to devote yourself to this. It doesn't have to be years and years and years, unless you're a slow learner. And especially with all the people out there now giving all the shortcuts out, and saying, don't do this, because I did this and it didn't work, and blah, blah, blah. People have mapped out the past, so it's so much easier now, but it still will take you some time to get really good at it. But in the meantime, your social life, and it's like, if you're going to be a freelancer, especially, or an entrepreneur, which a freelancer is, you're working for yourself. You really got to be careful about who you surround yourself with, and your family and even your closest friends may secretly be wishing for you to fail, because if you succeed in breaking out of the box that your friends or the group you hang out with are in, which is, they want to believe nobody can get ahead. The man keeps you down. It's a stacked deck trying to get out there. So, why are you even trying? Kayla, why, just go back to farming potatoes like you were meant to be. And it's like, as you succeed, their excuses for their own lives start to fall apart. So this may be all unconscious, but most of them will not be rooting for you. You got to be prepared for that. And then when you make it and suddenly you're rolling in it, then it's like, oh, we've always supported you. You say, here's our buddy Caleb. We always knew he was going to go places. Well, it's a tough life, and it can be a lonely life. It's tougher if you have a family, if you have kids and a wife. It's not impossible. A whole bunch of writers have done that. They just got to be understanding that you may be doing some late nights. You're gonna be doing stuff where you're sitting there staring at the wall. I had a friend who became a writer. I brought him into the business, but he was a graphic designer at the time, and his girlfriend was a graphic designer. He used to spend a lot of time sitting there and staring at the wall. That's all she saw, was him sitting there staring at the wall with kind of a blank expression. What was going on was in his head. It was, the stories were going around, all the stuff, and he was thinking. And this guy was one of the funniest guys you'd ever want to be around. He could take a trip to the supermarket and back, and never not have a story when he comes back with. He saw somebody doing something. He talked to somebody doing something. He saw something happen. He observed something, and it could have been the most boring trip in the world. He would find the stuff, and he'd sit there and just kind of cogitate on the story, and it would go through in his head. And his girlfriend at the time just could not handle it at all. She thought he was wasting time, being a lazy, slug. And, that didn't last. She wasn't supportive of what he was doing. So I don't know. That's just a small piece of advice. You can turn people around too, but with success. So, if you give your first couple of checks to the wife and kids or whatever, I don't know, there's tactics around it. But really, you want somebody who will support you in this crazy venture to, be a writer and be on your own. So back to stories that, I don't know how many stories I just came out. They're just off the top of my head, but it's just when you get into the idea that the world and the human interaction around the world is all story driven. It's not just story driven. The stories are there. When I was doing live events, before I was doing the mastermind, but I have people come in, like up to 40 people, and I do what I call, they were like workshops. I called them copywriting sweatshops. And I'd bring people in, and I'd throw their copy up on the wall, tear it apart, then take the next guy, throw it up there, tear it apart, and everybody's taking notes and doing all this stuff. And it's great. But I told them at lunch, don't go out with anybody if you know anybody else in the room. Go out with strangers, talk to them, and come back with a story. If you go out and eat alone, come back with a story. And then randomly, when they come back from lunch, I'd sit down and I'd ask people, none of them would have a story. They didn't take it seriously. And then I gave the example of, you're in you're in an elevator going from the eighth floor to the ground floor to go get a sandwich across the street or something, and there's a woman looking a little frazzled in there with two small kids who are soaking wet and mad at each other or something. It's like, and then the doors open, you go off and you eat your sandwich, come back, and you should be thinking about that. What was that about? Put on your detective hat. The mother's exhausted because they're small kids. The kids are wet because they're probably in the pool. Why are they mad at each other? What's going on? Siblings get mad at each other. It happens all the time, but there's stories behind there. And if you'd stopped and interviewed them, you could have some very, very interesting stories to tell. But it also keeps you in touch.
What are you looking for?
Well, the weird stuff first. That tactic. I think I talked to you about it. It's something I was doing. And then Gary, when I first met Gary, he was doing it too. And we called it walk it back. So the tactic is the first draft you create when you're writing an ad or something is to go balls to the wall. Absolutely the most outrageous, filthy, obscene, weirdo kind of copy you can come up with the stories. I mean, Halbert and I'd be laughing so hard we couldn't speak. But the only focus we had was staying on the product. We make stuff up about it, and we just come up with this crazy thing that no one outside of the two of us could ever see, because it was that gruesome. And then we'd walk it back. So a few times I have made the mistake of letting someone see an early draft of mine where I'm just, in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, I'll just write something silly and stupid here, and I'll walk it back and get more facts and fill that in. But right now it's a space holder. And I'd let somebody who wasn't a copywriter see that. They'd say, you can't say that's not true. That's, that. And I'd say, yeah, none of that's going to stay in there. So what you do is you go far, you go way beyond what is reasonable and would ever be published by a client. And then you walk it back from that way out there kind of position, walk it back to something that's normal and acceptable, change the words around, but you're operating from strength because that hilarious, weird, obscene stuff you were talking before has the kernel of truth in it anyway. And you walk it back and you're still using powerful copy behind it, but now you're saying it in a much nicer way and you're smoothing things out. You're not, if you made something up, you actually put in the actual facts in there and you make it go around. That is much more powerful way to write than to start with something really weak and gelatinous and that's not going to work, and then try to pump it up. That's really hard to do, because then you're essentially doing a complete rewrite. When you're backing it up, you're just kind of changing things out. So that tactic, which again we call walking it back, is so much easier on your brain because you start out. But you got to have an imagination. You got to be able to tell stories, and a good storyteller. There are two kinds of really good storytellers. Going back to Mark Twain, he made a lot over the fact that a lot of people are just bullshitters, but they tell rollicking good stories. But it's lies behind them, like the jumping frog of, I forget it's just, they tell outlandish stories, but they're so good that people just sit there and listen, and it's awesome. And then there are the people who, no, they think they're going to be fact checked, so they'll still tell a rollicking story. And you can't catch them in a lie because they're basing everything on truth. If they exaggerate, they'll tell you they're exaggerating, but they do the exaggeration anyway for effect or for comedic interludes or something. And then in between that are the people who are just kind of, sometimes they have a story that's pretty good. Other times they can take the most exciting thing that happened. They go off to Disney World with their kids and they get hijacked by terrorists, and they're cowering in fear, and then the terrorists slip on a banana peel and hit their heads, and they're able to escape, and they can take an experience like that and screw up the story. So it's like, oh yeah, was it Tuesday? I think it was Tuesday when we were there, or was it Wednesday? I forget, because we were going on the monorail on Tuesday. So it's like, no, just get to the story. The story is about the guy slipping on the banana peel and you guys being. And people would just miss that. So a good storyteller is telling a lot of stories, and he's watching his audience. It's good to tell stories live. I mean, Caleb is a master storyteller. I have had him stop in the middle, and I've left the bar and gone and got people and brought them back in, and then had Caleb continue telling the story because it's just so freaking hilarious. And and he picks up on things. You're one of my favorite stories with you is riding with Gary on the jet ski. Was it? Yeah, it was
Yeah,
a jet ski, wasn't it?
the pink UFO jet ski. Yeah.
Yeah, and that story is just hilarious. But you come by that because you're in a family of storytellers, in a community of storytellers, in a you come from a culture that prizes storytellers. You guys have awards for storytellers, don't you? I've heard about that. And it's all you had, because
Yeah.
otherwise you guys were a little cold island up above civilization, and you guys were one of the last to stop being barbarians. So you had to have something to offer people so they'd sit around and listen to you. You know, you
It was all we had. Stories were the only way for us to evolve.
and now you have low taxes. So that's so you got storytellers and low taxes and Guinness, and what the hell else do you need to be a world leader? So yeah, storytelling. I mean, it's I practice this with Michelle and I will go and do stuff that I didn't teach her. She had it, but she learned to make stories out of it. We'll go somewhere and we'll come back, and it's like, what's the best story out of this? Well, did you see the people in front of us that were then, we sometimes elaborate on what they did or something, if we go to a concert or something or see something. But everything is a story.
I remember Halbert telling me that, creativity comes from relaxation. And the best way to relax is to laugh. And you and he had the same quality, which was, you messers is the best way that I would describe it. You were just constantly looking for shenanigans at
Yeah.
every opportunity. And if the situation let you down, you were forced to manufacture shenanigans. if you encountered a dull situation, that was the green light to start
I'll tell
causing
you
some shenanigans.
So there's a quick
Go
story
ahead.
just to support that. We were doing the hot seat seminars down in Key West, and we were on the third or fourth one, which, there's 40 people in the audience. We were so bored by the second one we put on, but now we're there. So we're on stage, and the idea was to make the other guy crack up and either spit out his coffee or not be able to continue, and we have to take a break. So I was up there with Howard. We're sitting there, and somebody else was talking. They're telling their story about why their dry cleaning business, has more competition, and they're gonna something like that. It's just Jordy. Gary and I both had the answer, but we let them continue for theater's sake. I leaned over to him because we were facing the audience. I said, Gary, the blonde woman in the second row in the skirt, she's not wearing panties. And he jerks to attention, and he's trying to figure out how to get down low enough to be able to look. It wasn't true. I made it up. And he spent the rest of the time, so much so, and I was, I was the one that started laughing at that. And he lost the train, and when it was time for him to talk, he was still trying to figure it out as he stood up with the mic, and he's doing this shit, trying to be able to see, under the tables. It's knowing your audience. I knew he had a bit of a pervert inside of him, and it's low blows. Low blows were considered especially prized in the competitions we had to make each other, laugh. It was like the
Humiliation, embarrassment, insults, particularly any form of public humiliation. It wasn't good enough to just be, privately humiliated. It was, if it wasn't public, it was a public humiliation was a bullseye hit.
Yeah.
And the rest of the week was spent laughing at it.
Well, I was just going to add, Kevin Rogers is. He was a stand-up comedian, so he and I hit it off really well. I had a colleague come to me. I'll make this a quick story. It's much longer when I usually tell it. But a colleague came up to me after a meeting of a bunch of us. It was like a mastermind we had where there were a lot of big names in there, well, anyway, there were a lot of big names. And we were on the side, and we a couple of us had the whole room laughing and stuff. We took a break, and a colleague came up to me, really square guy, nice guy, efficient at what he does. But he said, can you teach me how to be funny? And I knew, I kind of knew the guy. He was a really good-hearted guy. And I thought, probably not. I told him, probably not, but let me think about it and give it a try. So I cornered Kevin Rogers, who again was a stand-up comic, wrote his own material, did all this stuff. And we spent several days trying to figure this out, how to break it down. It's like trying to explain a joke to someone and still have them laugh. You can't do it. If you have to explain the joke, you've lost. That's just forget it. Just get out of there. Trying to explain humor. Then I started looking into it. A good chunk of the population out there has no sense of humor. They will use social cues. When they see other people laughing, they'll do this in their lives. They see someone else laugh, they're a beat behind them, but then they'll laugh, sometimes the loudest. They'll just guffaw. That's the funniest thing they ever heard. But they're waiting for other people to laugh because they don't know what's funny, and they didn't think that was funny. There's a lot of them out there. I found that pretty interesting. Then just the idea that a lot of people have no sense of humor. It's not that they're grim pilgrims wandering around, pissed off, although a lot of them are. But the pilgrim is somebody who fears that somewhere in the world somebody's having a good time, and it's their job to squash that. So looking into what made people funny and not reminds me of how when you have a big audience, it's Gary used to call it, it's a math game. Marketing is a math problem because you get 100 people on average, or 1,000 people, or 1,000,000 people on your list. Wherever you're going to, if you got 100 people, you're going to, on average, you're gonna convert 2. 3 of them. That's a hit. That's 3% to a list in direct mail was a fantastic hit. You could run that sucker for a while and become wealthy. That meant 97 people didn't connect. Of that, how did that break down? Were there another 3 you could have brought in with a certain different way of approaching it or whatever? So if you want to use humor, I mean, this was the mistake that a lot of the Madison Avenue advertising guys made, was they kept saying you can't do humor in copy, and
Yeah.
I guess they suspected a lot. If it'll offend people, it's like, well, you got to make sure if the people you want, who are going to go from prospect to buyer, have a sense of humor, then by all means use a sense of humor. Go ahead and connect like that. There's nothing wrong with that. But it was like it's not taboo to use humor. You got to be careful about it because it may be received wrong. But what I found is that if you're going to do something, the biggest thing I had, the other taboo in writing was never use what we call 25-cent words. You try to use nickel words. You don't want to go above a 5th grade reading level with people, which is fine. But I also worked with guys like Jim Rutz, who use 25-cent words all the time. Big words, long words, multiple syllable words that would take half the line. But I figured out the way to use those is just explain it. So you use the word or the phrase or whatever. And then in parentheses, you say what that means in plain English is, then you explain it in plain English. Therefore, you got away with being intellectual and you explain it. You can do the same thing with humor. It's like you make reference to somebody and use an outrageous kind of term, or you do something and you can just do in parentheses. I just made that up. To translate into regular business talk, this guy understood what the customer wanted and gave it to him, in parentheses. But I said it as something else. So you can do all this stuff if you just explain it. You let the reader in on the joke, and then it's just that can go a long way. So when I was doing the golf stuff, and dear golf nut, which outraged some people, fine, get off the goddamn list. We don't want you, because the rest of this letter is going to be even worse. And the character I created, Michael O'Leary, which was an actual guy, Doc O'Leary, I talked to him a lot, and I created this character that was kind of like him, but it was him if he was even funnier and even more outrageous than he was. And that character, all the jokes, he was the butt of his own jokes, and so he never punched down. He was not offensive. It was like he was just telling stories on himself, which is, to me, the best kind of humor. So it just worked like gangbusters, and the list kind of coagulated around that because it brought in people who weren't offended by humor or confused by humor. And then those people, we continued to hit them with humor, and it went on, and they trusted us, and the rest is history.
People underestimate how boring other people's lives really are by, finding something that is even mildly exciting, you know. It's so uniquely different to everything else that's out there. And I think
My
that you kind of built your career around finding the confusing, the WTF type story, but you always mixed it in with some sort of scandal. I'm thinking of your bodybuilding letter, which I just there was probably a period of time that I could have probably read that thing. I could have recited it. I learned so much from it. In that bodybuilding letter, it was this conspiracy. They were all out to get you and rip you off. In the golfing letters, you know, I remember it was so many stories. There was the cigarette smoking, beard belly, you know, 300-pound
That was
guy,
my
you
favorite
know,
one. Yes.
deaf in one ear or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the outrageous. And then in the beat 'em up ads, it was, you know, this 90-pound guy that was, you know, like I forget what the stories were, but there
Yeah,
was,
three
you know,
badass
he went to
bikers.
like
Yeah.
a biker bar.
Yeah, the naked girls all laughed when this skinny guy stood up to three enormous bikers. But then, and
Yeah,
then it went on. So that was the takeoff on the piano ad from long ago. And the thing was, he was a bouncer in a strip club. Yeah.
yeah. But it's this combination of something really weird and unusual mixed in with this, you know, either some sort of kind of rags to riches, loser to hero,
Yep.
conspiracy. Like, you know, did you kind of have, like, I'm sure over time you developed this kind of storylines that you always looked for every time you started into a project, or like, were you always trying to kind of fit something into a known winning strategy, or were you just really hot on the heels of, like, you know, from one clue to the next building this story?
I think my secret power was a capacity to become extremely bored very quickly. And when I became a freelancer, my twin cousins were a year and a half younger than I was, and we were just thieves, thick as thieves throughout our childhood. All three of our childhoods would have been a fraction of the fun it was if it wasn't for the three of us getting together. And I was the instigator in most things. It was like, I keep thinking about this thing. We were in front of this huge tunnel, 6 feet in diameter. It was part of the wash system that controlled rain when it overflowed where we lived. And it channeled all the water that ran and went into a wash and went out to the sea. And we're standing there, we're like 10 years old and we're standing there, we're looking at it. And we consumed horror and science fiction stories and novels and stuff. And we're standing there, we're going, well, there's vampires in there. And there's, oh, absolutely, there are vampires in there. So we got sticks and rocks. We go, well, are we going in anyway? Oh, hell yeah, we're going in. Let's go. And it was like, we believed in our hearts at 10 and 9 years old, we were going to find vampires in there. And we marched in anyways, little kids, just, we seriously, and we didn't know if the thing went in and had drop-offs because it was dark. As we walked in, it took a turn, and I looked back and I saw the entryway kind of shrank, and then it went away as we turned, and then we're in complete pitch blackness. We didn't have matches with us or a flashlight or anything, and we just kept going. And we probably went a mile or two in there, and then we finally saw something. There was a grate in a gutter in a street, and we looked up. We were able to look out and see the street, So then we were safe. But we started going back there a lot. But anyway, it was that idea of fearlessness from either sheer stupidity or ignorance of the consequences, or embracing the consequences. Because when we would body surf, we like to body surf in the waves during what they call red flag days. The lifeguards were actively telling people, don't go in, the water is riptide and these huge waves are gobbling people up. And we're out there. I got hit by a wave when I was probably 17. And it was during riptides, and they had red flags. And I remember the lifeguards were out there in their Jeeps going back and forth yelling at us, because there were about 5 of us out there, teenagers, catching these awesome waves. We were body surfing. And I caught a great wave. I'm going, and the riptide, I just watched all the water in front of me got swept under the wave in the riptide, and it's just wet sand below me. and about 5 tons of water on top of me. And I went and I slammed down. I hit my head, and my butt hit the back of my head. I got hit in a pretzel, and then I'm swished around in the wave, and it kind of washes me up, and I'm laying there, and I kind of stand up, and I shake myself off, and I look around and feel my back, and I go, okay, and I go back out, and I go and catch the next wave, and it was just we were, that sense of being invulnerable that stayed with me for a very long time. Trying to get back to your question, my philosophy in writing is you got to make your ad or your video or your site or whatever the best thing that your prospect has read today or will read today. So it wakes him up. It's like like Thoreau said, most men lead lives of quiet desperation. They're just, if they don't have a good buddy that makes them laugh, if they don't have, some outside influence that makes them laugh or helps them or understands where they're at and why they're frustrated, you can be that person. It's like if they're whatever they need, whatever is making their life less than it should be, that's traumatic. These guys, women, these people are in some kind of trauma. Something is holding them back from living their lives, hurting them. If the future thinking of them, am I going to make the rent this month? Geez, my kid's going into college. All this stuff is going on, and you come in and you have an answer to one of their main problems, or all of them, or whatever they think the problem is. Then, if you say it right, you'll be the thing that wakes them up, and it's the best thing they ever read, because now their future stuff is not about how horrible it is. It's like you help them envision how life will be once all this, clicks into place, and they'll be wealthy, living on the Riviera with a new trophy wife, relaxing, sipping Mai Tais on the beach while the sun sets, and the music is always playing around you, and there's no trouble and no worry and no angst about anything. I mean, it's just, you can change lives. And I've done that with the most mundane stuff. It's like when I was speaking, I used to tell this, it wasn't even a real story, but it was an example. If you're a father of a couple of young daughters and you're building them a playhouse in the backyard and you run out of nails, and the nails that came with the kit or whatever, and you got to go get nails, and you don't have any idea where to go or whatever, you're a clueless father, like you are, Kip. And that's traumatic. His little girls are upset. He feels like a failure because he was going to build this thing and now it's delayed. He can't let them out until it's finished. So by the lack of a 3-penny nail, his life has gone into almost a tailspin. And if you happen upon him, again, this is just an example. If you happen upon him and you got the answer, come to Home Depot, go down aisle 5, go down 15 feet down aisle 5, turn to your right, and there are the nails you need, the wood screws or whatever. Then you solve his problem. So he goes from feeling guilty and sad for his kids and upset that they're crying to suddenly everything's fine. And you can take that small of a thing, is still traumatizing to him. And then you start blowing it up to money problems, to job problems, things like that. You can still do the same thing. It's all part of the same continuum. As humans, we're not built to be in this world of concrete and steel and so-called civilization. We got one foot in the jungle. So that's another secret I have, is that we're all, as I'm older, I'm driving around. I have to drive with the idea that every other person on the road has committed to trying to murder me. They're all dangerous and crazy, and so I added to that. It was like that was enough. And I drive defensively, because I was kind of a speeder in my day. But I drive defensively. I look out for people. I give people plenty of room. I let people in. They want to get in front of me. Sure, come on in. But what I do now is I've added something to it. They're also orangutans, because we are pretty close to the jungle. We're close to being apes, to being furry apes. We're just apes that have lost most of our hair. And if I look at them as orangutans, then it really drives it home. These people shouldn't be driving. And I just look at them. I look at a woman who spent a lot of time fixing her hair, and she's out driving around. No, she's an orangutan with a beehive hairdo. And it makes me laugh, and it makes me fearful of what she's going to do next, because she's just a an ape out there, not really understanding the 2,000 pound machine that she's hurling down the highway at a high speed,
without a care in the world,
without a care, they're smoking a cigarette. And it's like, just the Planet of the Apes was good. It was good fun,
but her phone while she's doing it.
Yeah. And her little ape kids in the back and everything. It's just that just has helped me enormously. And now, but also, this branches out. It's like I look at a CEO on TV, say, being interviewed by somebody on one of the talk shows, and it's like, he's got his tie cinched up, and he's talking big words, and he's doing the NBA dance. You just imagine it was a orangutan there with a cinched up tie and the hair is bunched out. He's like, that's ridiculous. And that's what he is. And then you look under it, and you know what? He is ridiculous. Most CEOs are ridiculous. They make way too much money. They make short-term decisions that are bad for the company, really bad for employees. They can get a bonus by firing 10,000 people in November. They can get an end of the year bonus, at the end of the fiscal year for doing that, because that actually kind of technically raises the income in the books, for a short period of time. Then when things go to shit, and of course the first department they fire is customer service. They figure that's who needs it? Our products are so wonderful, because I remember, being involved in making them and stuff. Well, you lost track of it, and they're not wonderful, and you should really pump up your customer service instead of firing everyone. So. But that's why guys like you and me got to come in, and that's our job as consultants. I figure an A-list writer is a consultant who also provides writing. So my main job is consulting, and I do a lot of consulting. And my job is to make them cry, or at least, they're going to go home tonight and curl into a fetal position and cry because of all the stuff they've stopped doing, that they're ignoring, that they're, they come to me and say, well, there's a lot of competition now. Well, are you tracking the competition? Are you spying on them? Are you buying their product and seeing how their customer service is? Are you doing all this stuff? Because if you're not, they're killing you on the stuff that you're not doing. It's so they go home and they think, oh God, I was so bad. I fired the customer service department. If they're good, they'll do that. Often they'll just fire me and say, he's saying stuff I don't want to hear. So.
John, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here, and I really appreciate it. If anybody wants to go and study your work, learn more about what it is that you do, where would people go to learn more?
I have a blog that's been up since 2007 or something. It's john-carlton.com, john-carlton.com, and sign up for my newsletter. We email a newsletter like 3 times a week, sometimes more often. And it's it's a lot of my writing. And at the blog, if there's anything you care to buy, I have 5 books or something, and courses and stuff like that. It's all there.
Whatever you can get your hands on from John, you should absolutely, sign up for the newsletter, try and get John's ads if they're out there even these days. Books, courses, I highly recommend them. John, thank you so much for everything. Thank you for taking the time to be here. This was a fabulous, fabulous show. Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, always happy to talk with you, Caleb. We should talk more often too.
So I'd love to know, based on what John and I were talking about here today, what was your biggest takeaway about creating stories that sell? Share your thoughts below, and I look forward to hearing from you. And if you have a question about marketing, advertising, or monetization that you would like my help with, all you got to do is send me a quick email to caleb@monetizationresearch.com, and I will do my best to include my response in an upcoming episode. In the next episode, my guest will be none other than the legendary John Benson, another master copywriter, perhaps best known as the inventor and pioneer of the video sales letter in marketing, as well as one of the leaders in leveraging AI in copywriting. So for heaven's sake. Look out for that one. It will be absolutely awesome. And as always, the best way to stay in the loop with all things monetization is to join our free newsletter, Monetization Daily. All you got to do to get it is go to monetizationresearch.com. We will send you our favorite news, tips, tactics, and discoveries about how to monetize your business, which is ultimately all about increasing your profits. Again, to get that, head on over to monetizationresearch.com.